Okay, folks, welcome. This is a quick video, I promise, on the structure of tragedy. Macbeth, we're reading, is generally called a tragedy. It's categorized as such. And so to understand that, I just want to give you a little bit of background about what a tragedy is, how it should work, and then you can kind of decide for yourselves if Macbeth fits this or not. A lot of people have argued about it over the years. I've got my magic chair going here. All right, so what's a tragedy? Well, I can tell you what it's not. A tragedy is not a bummer. That's when something goes, like you walk across the street and a bus runs you over. That's not a tragedy. That's just a bummer. That's different. A tragedy is a formal structure in a theater, in a play. Now, it doesn't have to fit every single element of this. It's not like, you just sort of plug in the formula and it works. But basically, there's a few essential elements to a tragedy that makes it different from, say, a comedy or just a regular drama or, romantic comedy or any of those things. A tragedy's got a formal structure. So, what does it mean? All right. Well, this comes from back in the day. This was defined in ancient Greece by Aristotle, who defined a lot of things. And the ancient Greeks sort of invented theater. They invented plays and all that. It was sort of their way of entertainment, public spectacle, having fun. Television. That was their version. And one of the things they had, one of the forms they used, that they considered to be the most important, the highest, if you will, was tragedy, because life is tragic sometimes, and it was an art form they really used a lot and celebrated. People would get big honors in ancient Greece for the best tragedy and all that. So Aristotle decided to sort of lay out what one of these really should look like for it to work properly. So here's just a few key things. So it's a story where you need someone called a tragic hero. Okay, a tragedy is not just a story where something goes wrong. You need this specific thing first. You need a tragic hero. So what is a tragic hero? Well, traditionally it was usually a guy that was like royalty or some sort, but it can be anybody as long as he or she is in a kind of a higher position, like a CEO or a government official or some high position in a church or government. And there's a reason for that, because they have to fall. They have to fall, so they have to be up a little bit. Other than that, they have to be like us. They have to be sort of human. They can't be perfect. They can't be really evil and rotten. They can't be, a tragic hero is not Jeffrey Dahmer. Is not a tragic hero. There's nothing really good about Jeffrey Dahmer that is, it's basically a story of a tragedy is a decent person gone wrong, essentially. Jeffrey Dahmer is not a decent person gone wrong. So we have to, and that's important because we as the audience have to sympathize with the character. We have to kind of like the tragic hero, at least at the beginning, or at least understand his or her reasons and for doing what they do. So it's important that they're like us. Their decisions are decisions we might make also in a given situation. That gets us in their shoes, and it works. However, there's a thing that they have that the rest of us hopefully don't, and that is a part of their character that's a little bit off. They call it a tragic flaw. Hamartia is what the Greeks called it, the ancient Greeks. And hamartia, or a tragic flaw, is it's a part of your character that is sort of a malignant part of your character. It's overgrown. It's an otherwise healthy thing gone overboard. So we all have traits like ambition or pride and things like that, and those are generally good traits in moderation. What happens to the tragic hero is he or she has this trait, whatever it is, in sort of excess. They can't control it. So, is it good to be, to have pride and feel good about yourself? Yeah, absolutely. Everyone should. Is it good to have so much pride that you think you should invade Russia like Napoleon did? Nope, that's too much pride. So it's a matter of degree, really, what causes this. It's not the tragic hero is not categorically different from the rest of us. It's just a matter of scale, and how this flaw shows up. So that's what a tragic flaw is. It's something a little bit out of balance, not an evil trait. It's a it's a normal trait gone wrong, gone too far. So in the case of pride is good. Too much pride, we call it hubris. It's a great term. It means what Napoleon had. Getting too big for your britches, taking it too far, not knowing when to, not knowing when to pull back, not knowing when to hold them and when to fold them, to quote the great Kenny Rogers, who just died the other day. So that's hubris. Love, though, love's a great, really good to love your partner or whatever, but too much of that, you get jealousy and it gets dangerous. Wait a second. Yes, my wife is glaring at me here as I say this. No, just kidding. But yes, love can, too much love, you get, this is Othello. You haven't read Othello maybe, but Othello, that's my whiteboard falling over. It's not properly set up. There we go. Okay, Othello loves Desdemona a lot. So much so that he starts to wonder, oh boy, I hope she loves me as much as I love her. And then they often have help. Tragic heroes often have someone kind of as...
like Iago.
Yes. What is he calls it? Pouring poison in thine ear.
Yeah.
Someone to, like Iago and Iago's in Othello. He's the one that keeps telling Othello, keep an eye on that wife of yours. She's awfully pretty. A lot of guys are looking at her. And Othello gets more and more wound up. In this case, ambition, which is what Macbeth has, and that's a really healthy thing to have. It's good to want to succeed. But if you want to succeed so much that you're willing to make huge moral compromises and kill your friend the king, or, short sell your stock before a pandemic or whatever it is, that's too much ambition. So again, it's largely a matter of degree. Aristotle and the Greeks really believed that there wasn't, and they had a point about this kind of, there isn't so much right or wrong in most of life. There's people going overboard. That's what makes for trouble. And evil is really something that in moderation would be good, taken too far. They were huge believers in, especially Aristotle, in what he called the middle way, the moderation and everything. So tragedy is essentially what happens to a decent person when their sense of moderation goes away. All right, so, or is tempted away by something. Now, real quick, it's hard to see. I don't know if you can really pick up on this, but this is what we call, it's a guy named Freytag made this. It's called a triangle. So if you look, it basically it's the structure of how a tragedy should work. It begins with what they call the start or the incentive moment. Something, you have your tragic hero hanging around doing his thing or her thing, just being whatever, and then something happens that sort of kicks their tragic flaw into gear. Hamlet's, his father's ghost comes to visit him. In the case of Macbeth, the witches find him and sort of plant that seed in his head. And so what happens to the tragic hero is then we have what they call the rising action. The hero starts to do things that he or she probably shouldn't do, but that they're sort of compelled to do by this tragic flaw. Macbeth will then start to think about killing Duncan, and he will kill Duncan. And then how it has to work is that for a real tragedy to work right, these ensuing actions, these rising actions that crank up the drama, each of them needs to be sort of naturally caused by the one before. That's the best kind of, so because he kills Duncan, he has to kill the guards. And then because he has to kill the guards, Donalbain and Malcolm get driven away and Macbeth becomes king. And so things work naturally. It's not like, things don't happen randomly in a good tragedy. The acts of, in a way, the king or whoever the tragic hero is slowly sort of tightens their own noose without really knowing it. And we watch it, we sense it happening every time they go, oh, you don't do that, but they do. Their flaw drives them to do it. And that disconnect between their thinking and us watching it and knowing where it's going is called dramatic irony. You feel that, oh boy, Oedipus, don't go into Thebes, Oedipus. Yep, don't do that, Oedipus. But he does because he's compelled to. Macbeth, you say, well, Jesus, you don't have to kill Duncan, but he's compelled to. In his case, largely by the ambitions of his wife and himself and their strange relationship. And then what happens is it goes up and up and up, series of necessary actions until you get to the breaking point. The character pushes it too far. Napoleon was doing pretty good there, Austerlitz and all that, but then, got to invade Russia. No, bad idea. What happens, they call it the reversal of fortune, or the climax of the story. The character pushes it too far. And then what happens then, of course, is karma kicks in, and you have what they call the catastrophe, or the denouement. And the denouement brings them to the resolution. And so, basically, as I said, karma kicks in. The tragic hero is brought down from wherever he was, or his kingship, or whatever it was. The tragic hero is brought down, and the story is resolved. So there's a resolution, and in Macbeth's case, and in most of these tragedies, the resolution involves a sort of a restoration of the normal order of things, so that especially in Macbeth, the whole normal order of things got out of whack a bit. So things are restored in the end, and normal life resumes. Okay. So that's basically that. The only thing to remember is the goal of all this. Why did they have these things? Well, they believed in this sort of process. We've talked about it in class called a catharsis, where people watching or observing this or participating go through a sort of a vicarious, they go through with the character, the downfall and all that, but they do it vicariously, and that sort of lets them cleanse out their emotions. It gets their yayas out. And so it allows them to sort of experience that, learn from it, clean their emotions out, but not get their head cut off with a sword or anything like that. So it allows a vicarious purging of the emotions, and that's what the Greeks called a catharsis. And that's the goal of it. The Greeks believed, and I think they had a point, that people needed to sort of go through this process to empathize with others, but also just to get their yayas out and to sort of understand, to feel better, to purge that bad energy and get back to their normal life. So anyhow, that is that. I hope that helps. And then we're going to talk next time about whether we think Macbeth fits this mold, because again, not every single tragedy is the same. They don't all fit exactly what Aristotle wanted. But there's, the essential elements are things like a tragic hero or heroine, that person having a tragic flaw, and the basic, the sort of necessary rise and downfall of the character. Those are really the essential elements of it. So I leave you with that, and hopefully this isn't too long, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a great weekend. Bye.